The second he whispered, "She'll be gone by Monday," in Japanese, laughing like it was a joke, I felt every ounce of humiliation cut through me like a blade. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I was powerless. But that moment sparked something darker, a fierce, quiet rage burning beneath my calm exterior. I wasn't just going to survive their betrayal. I was going to outsmart them and make sure everyone saw who was really in control. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I replayed that scene over and over in my mind. The cold sneer on Gregory R.'s face, the knowing glances exchanged by his cronies. For months, I'd been the underdog, mocked for my quiet diligence and overlooked because I never made noise. But what they didn't see was the mountain of evidence I'd been silently gathering. Timestamps that didn't add up. Bonus adjustments made in the dead of night. Signatures that weren't mine or anyone else's. Every forged document, every fraudulent claim, meticulously documented in my private dossier I called Scorched Earth. I wasn't just fighting back. I was preparing to bring the entire corrupt operation crashing down. It wasn't easy. Every step had to be calculated. I knew Gregory was ruthless, and if he smelled a threat, I'd be the first to go. They stripped me of my key project ownership, sidelined me in meetings, and whispered rumors to undermine my reputation. But I stayed silent, calm, patient. Because I had a secret weapon, my fluency in Japanese and my connection to Mayu Tanaka, the CEO's discreet and formidable assistant in Tokyo. Through encrypted messages, I sent Mayu the proof she needed, the altered financial statements, forged approvals, and emails Gregory hoped no one would see. The office felt colder with every passing day. I watched from the sidelines as Gregory tried to maintain his facade, cracking under pressure when questioned about discrepancies I'd pointed out. His arrogance was his downfall. He underestimated me at every turn. The Monday morning board meeting was set to be the showdown. I could feel the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. As the CEO stood beside Mayu, they laid out the evidence like a prosecutor in court, each fact hitting Gregory with undeniable force. Gregory's attempts to defend himself crumbled, his words hollow against the mountain of proof. The room held its breath as security quietly escorted him out, the once powerful VP reduced to a mere shadow. And me? I was promoted on the spot, to Director of Financial Systems, reporting directly to Tokyo HQ, a position I'd quietly earned but never dared to ask for. The humiliation I endured flipped into triumph, and the silent war I'd fought finally reached its crescendo. But beneath the surface, the real battle was far from over. The office whispered rumors, old allies turned wary, and Gregory's loyalists plotted in the shadows. I was no longer the underestimated quiet girl. I was the woman who had exposed the rot at the company's core, and everyone knew it. What came next would test not only my resolve, but my ability to navigate a world where power and betrayal were two sides of the same coin. The days after Gregory's fall weren't filled with relief like I'd expected. Instead, a quiet storm brewed beneath the surface. His loyalists moved like shadows, their whispers cutting through the office air with poison. They saw me as the intruder who'd toppled their king, and they weren't about to let me rest easy. Meetings became minefields. Every suggestion I made was met with resistance, every achievement downplayed. The higher-ups, while publicly supportive, privately watched me like a hawk, waiting for any sign I might falter. I understood the game all too well. The office wasn't just a place for work. It was a battlefield where power was traded in glances and alliances. I was still the underdog, just in a new guise. But this time I wasn't alone. Mayu from Tokyo became my secret weapon. Her influence was subtle but undeniable. Through encrypted chats, she guided me on how to navigate corporate politics, shared insights about the board's thinking, and helped me craft communications that disarmed critics before they could raise their voices. Meanwhile, I poured every ounce of energy into rebuilding trust among the staff and key clients. I knew that exposing corruption was only the beginning. The company needed to heal and move forward. So I focused on transparency, initiating weekly updates, town halls, and open forums where questions were encouraged. It was risky, giving everyone a voice, but it worked. Slowly, people started seeing me not as a threat, but as a leader who listened. But the real challenge was deeper. Gregory's fraudulent actions had left financial scars. Bonuses were frozen, budgets tightened, and morale dipped sharply. I had to balance the books while steering the company away from further damage. Late nights became routine. I dissected spreadsheets, negotiated with vendors, and restructured teams to maximize efficiency. Each decision was a tightrope walk between survival and growth. One evening, as the office emptied and city lights flickered outside the windows, I sat alone, reviewing the latest audit reports. My phone buzzed with a message from Mayu. New information? Prepare. My heart quickened. This wasn't over. There were layers of deception I hadn't yet uncovered, names and transactions hidden beneath the surface. I realized that Gregory had been just one player in a much larger, more dangerous game. Over the next few weeks, I worked in silence, piecing together the puzzle. Every new document, every cross-checked timestamp brought me closer to the truth. I coordinated with Mayu to securely transmit evidence to Tokyo HQ, ensuring it was locked away from prying eyes. The weight of secrecy was heavy, but necessary. If I leaked too soon, the entire investigation could be compromised, and my own position jeopardized. One morning, as I entered the office, whispers followed me like shadows. The tension was palpable. Rumors of an internal probe circulated, and I felt the weight of scrutiny shift, from me to the higher-ups implicated in the new findings. I could see it in the eyes of the board members. Fear, uncertainty, and a flicker of guilt. The power dynamics were shifting again, and this time the stakes were higher than ever. But just as I prepared to present the new dossier, a curveball hit. Gregory, though ousted, wasn't silent. He launched a defamation campaign through anonymous sources, attacking my credibility and questioning the validity of the evidence. The media caught wind, spinning headlines that questioned whether the company's leadership was truly clean or just swapping one corrupt figure for another. It was a calculated move to muddy the waters and regain some control. The backlash was swift and ruthless. Clients called, demanding reassurances. Some contracts were put on hold. The boardroom erupted with tension. Some urged me to retreat, to focus on damage control rather than digging deeper. But I refused. This was my moment, not to cower but to stand firm. I knew the truth was on my side, and the only way forward was full transparency and relentless pursuit of justice. With Mayu's counsel, we planned a bold response. A detailed report would be released to the public, accompanied by a press conference where I would address the allegations head-on. The goal was to flip the narrative, showing the company's commitment to integrity and accountability. It was a gamble, one that could either restore faith or accelerate the company's downfall. The night before the announcement, sleep evaded me. I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the mockery in Japanese, the quiet hours sifting through falsified records, the moments I'd almost given up. But beneath the exhaustion, a fierce pride pulsed. I wasn't just fighting for a job. I was fighting for every person who'd been dismissed, underestimated, and silenced. As dawn broke, I rehearsed my speech one last time. The stakes were clear. This was more than a corporate scandal. It was a reckoning, and I was ready to face it. The conference room was packed, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters poised with pens and microphones. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your throat tight and palms slick. I stepped up to the podium, heart hammering, not from fear, but from the weight of everything riding on this moment. Years of betrayal, humiliation, and silent battles had led to this public reckoning. And I was ready to strip away the lies. I started by acknowledging the turmoil the company had endured, the rumors, the accusations, the uncertainty. I didn't shy away from the facts. I laid out the evidence with precision. Forged timestamps, doctored bonus sheets, falsified compliance forms, each detail supported by documents and testimonies. The room hung on every word, the silence punctuated only by the soft clatter of pages turning. Mayu's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me to stay calm and let the truth speak. Behind me, the CEO nodded quietly, a silent pillar of support that steadied me. I revealed how the corrupt network extended beyond Gregory, how a few trusted individuals had tried to manipulate financial reports and conceal misconduct. It was a systemic failure, but one we were determined to root out. Questions came fast and furious. Reporters pressed for names, motives, and assurances. I didn't flinch. Each answer was measured, honest, and backed by evidence. When asked about my own role, I spoke candidly about the challenges I'd faced, being underestimated, sidelined, even mocked in a language I understood perfectly. The room shifted, the narrative changing from scandal to resilience. The press conference was a turning point. Stories began to shift. Headlines praised the company's transparency and my leadership. The rumor mill slowed as confidence returned among clients and partners. Internally, morale improved, and former skeptics started to rally behind the new direction. It was the beginning of a healing process, but the victory wasn't without cost. Some in the boardroom whispered fears that the public scrutiny could invite regulatory investigations or lawsuits. Old alliances fractured further as hidden agendas surfaced. I realized that exposing corruption didn't guarantee smooth sailing. It opened a new chapter of challenges. Through it all, Mayu remained my steady ally. We expanded our collaboration, coordinating cross-border audits and compliance reviews. Her insight into Tokyo's corporate culture and governance provided a blueprint for reform. Together, we crafted policies that emphasized accountability and transparency, rebuilding the company's foundation brick by brick. I also took time to mend bridges with colleagues who had distanced themselves during the turmoil. Private meetings, genuine apologies, and shared visions helped restore trust. It was humbling, but necessary. Leadership wasn't just about authority, it was about connection and empathy. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, a wave of quiet pride washed over me. The same people who had once whispered behind my back now greeted me with respect. The company buzzed with cautious optimism. My project, once stripped from me, was back under my control, revamped with input from a diverse team committed to excellence. Yet beneath this progress, I remained vigilant. Gregory's defamation campaign had taught me that enemies don't vanish overnight. I installed new security protocols, strengthened reporting channels, and encouraged a culture where no misconduct could hide. The scars of betrayal fueled a determination to prevent history from repeating. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. A confidential message from Mayu with an encrypted file attached. It contained a list of offshore accounts linked to the fraudulent network, evidence of money laundering and embezzlement beyond anything I'd imagined. This wasn't just a company scandal. It was a criminal enterprise. The implications were massive. Sharing this with Tokyo HQ meant escalating the issue to legal authorities and regulators. It was a dangerous move, but necessary. The company's future, and my own, depended on rooting out every corrupt thread. I felt a surge of power mixed with caution. The fight wasn't just about reclaiming my dignity or position anymore. It was about justice on a grander scale, a reckoning that could reshape the company's legacy and maybe even the industry. But as I prepared to take this next step, a cold chill ran down my spine. A message popped up on my screen, anonymous, cryptic, and chilling. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The game had changed, and the stakes had never been higher. The warning hit me like a punch in the gut, but it didn't shake me. If anything, it fueled the fire inside. I wasn't someone who backed down from threats, especially not when the truth was at stake. I double-checked the source, traced the message as far as I could, but it was cloaked in layers of anonymity. Whoever sent it was skilled, desperate, and dangerous, but I'd already come too far to turn back now. I shared the message with Mayu, and her response was steady, unflinching. "We expected resistance. This is bigger than just one man's greed. We must be cautious but resolute." We ramped up our security protocols, encrypted all communications, and tightened internal controls. I personally vetted every person with access to sensitive information, knowing that betrayal could come from anywhere, even those closest to me. Meanwhile, the office felt like a pressure cooker. Some employees whispered about shadowy figures and hidden agendas. Others rallied behind me, their faith unwavering. The board was divided, half urging caution to avoid scandal, the other half demanding a full purge of corruption. I found myself navigating political minefields every day, balancing transparency with discretion. One night, long after the building emptied, I sat at my desk staring at the latest batch of documents Mayu had decrypted. Contracts, emails, wire, transfers, all painting a damning picture of illicit transactions funneling money overseas. The scope of the fraud was staggering. It wasn't just Gregory and his cronies. It was a web of complicity reaching higher than I'd imagined. I realized the fight wasn't only about saving the company. It was about cleansing a system poisoned by greed and deceit. I became obsessed, working through nights, piecing together timelines, preparing dossiers, readying myself to bring this to the authorities. Every discovery felt like peeling back another layer of a dark, festering wound. Then, the unexpected happened. A trusted colleague I'd confided in suddenly distanced herself, her attitude cold and evasive. I confronted her gently, and she broke down, admitting she'd been pressured to stay silent, warned of consequences for anyone who crossed the powerful network. Her confession was heartbreaking, but also a stark reminder of the human cost behind this corporate war. I promised her protection and invited her to join our effort openly. Slowly, others followed, emboldened by the growing momentum. The tide was turning. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. Anonymous threats escalated to attempted sabotage, files mysteriously deleted, access codes changed, even late-night visits to the office that set off alarms. I was no longer just a whistleblower. I was a target. Yet, amid the chaos, a surprising alliance formed. The CEO, once cautious, stepped forward publicly to endorse the investigation fully, pledging support and resources. His decision sent a powerful message and fractured the opposition within the board. With official backing, we launched an internal task force, combining forces from Tokyo and headquarters. Our operation was methodical, ruthless, and transparent. We interviewed employees, audited accounts, and worked closely with external investigators. One pivotal day, the task force uncovered a smoking gun, a hidden account linked directly to a senior executive who'd outwardly been above suspicion. The revelation rocked the company to its core. Resignations followed. The network's hold crumbled. I stood before the board again, this time not as the underestimated employee, but as a leader who'd weathered storms and emerged victorious. The company was scarred but healing, reborn from the ashes of betrayal. Looking back, the humiliation, the mockery, and the quiet battles had forged a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The whispered threats in Japanese, the attempts to push me out, only fueled my determination to reclaim my space and rewrite the rules. The victory wasn't just mine. It was for every quiet fighter, every underestimated voice rising against injustice. And as I stood at the helm of a company now defined by integrity and resilience, I knew the fight had changed me forever. But in the back of my mind, I remained vigilant. Because in this world of power and betrayal, the war never truly ends. It only evolves. The office was quieter than usual that morning, but the tension was palpable. I could feel it in every glance, every hushed conversation. The fallout from the exposed fraud was still settling like dust after a storm, thick, suffocating, but also clearing the way for something new. I walked through the corridors, not as the girl who once hid in the shadows, but as the woman who forced the darkness into the light. The weight of that transformation settled heavily on my shoulders, but it was a burden I carried with pride. My phone buzzed, Mayu's message lighting up the screen, a simple phrase. Prepare. Tokyo sends its team next week. This was it. The moment when global oversight would turn from vague promises into firm, tangible action. The team from Tokyo was reputed to be ruthless but fair, bringing the highest standards of governance and discipline. Their arrival was a turning point not just for the company but for my own journey. I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. The stakes were higher than ever, but I also knew I was ready. At the board meeting later that day, the atmosphere was electric. Eyes darted nervously as the CEO introduced the Tokyo team's leaders, stern, impeccably dressed, exuding authority. They outlined their mandate: a full audit, restructuring, and a zero-tolerance policy for corruption or complacency. It was exactly what we needed. Their presence shifted the power dynamics in the room, tilting the balance firmly away from the old guard and toward a future built on transparency. But with every shift, resistance grew. Some executives, previously complicit or silent, began pushing back, quietly at first, then more aggressively. Meetings were leaked, strategies undermined. The boardroom felt less like a place of governance and more like a battlefield. I was attacked subtly, dismissed in meetings, blamed for delays, questioned about every decision. The old games hadn't disappeared. They'd just mutated. In response, I doubled down. I leaned on Mayu, who was my lifeline across time zones and cultures, a reminder that I wasn't alone. We coordinated tirelessly, communicating in encrypted channels, sharing insights, and countering sabotage. I also built a small coalition within the company, trusted allies who shared my vision and were willing to fight alongside me. Together, we began implementing reforms that no one could easily overturn. But the real breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a company-wide town hall, a former whistleblower stepped forward publicly. His testimony exposed a last pocket of resistance: senior managers still manipulating reports and intimidating employees. His courage sparked a wave of similar revelations. The company finally faced the full scale of its problems, and with that acknowledgement came a collective breath of relief. I saw in that moment what true leadership meant: creating a space where voices could be heard without fear, where truth was valued above all else. The humiliation I'd endured, the silent mockery in Japanese that once stung me deeply, it was all fuel. I was no longer the underdog, but the guardian of integrity. Still, the journey was far from over. Behind closed doors, threats persisted. The anonymous messages returned, more frequent and menacing. One night, I found a note slipped under my door. "This isn't over." But I refused to let fear dictate my steps. Instead, I took every precaution, fortified my resolve, and kept pushing forward. Then came the unexpected moment that changed everything. During a confidential meeting with the Tokyo team, I was handed an envelope marked urgent. Inside was a detailed report, a new scandal unearthed in one of our overseas subsidiaries. It wasn't just financial misconduct this time. There were serious ethical violations involving employee safety and environmental regulations. The implications were catastrophic, threatening to undo all the progress we'd made. I felt the familiar surge of anxiety mixed with fierce determination. This was the ultimate test, not just of the company's resilience, but of my own. The battle lines were drawn once again, sharper and more dangerous. But I had learned how to navigate these treacherous waters, how to transform pain into power. With Mayu's steady support, I crafted a plan to address the crisis head-on. We scheduled emergency meetings, contacted regulators, and prepared a full disclosure. It was a gamble, risking reputation and investor confidence, but I knew transparency was the only path to redemption. This was the moment where true courage showed, admitting mistakes and committing to fix them. The day of the public announcement arrived, and I stood before the cameras with a calmness I hadn't known I possessed months ago. I laid out the facts, took full responsibility on behalf of the company, and outlined a comprehensive strategy for reform and restitution. The room was charged with energy, some skeptical, others hopeful. But for the first time in a long time, I saw the flicker of trust returning. That night, as the news cycle swirled and the boardroom buzzed, I reflected on the journey. From being mocked in a foreign language, sidelined and betrayed, to standing here as a leader who faced storms head-on, the transformation was profound. The scars of betrayal still throbbed, but they were badges of survival. Yet, deep inside, I knew the most difficult challenges were still ahead. Because when you confront corporate giants and corrupt power structures, the fight never truly ends. It only changes shape. But this time, I was ready to lead it. The days after the public announcement were a whirlwind. Calls from media, regulators, and investors flooded in, some supportive, others sharp with suspicion. But the real challenge was internal, holding the fractured company together while steering it toward reform. I spent long hours in strategy sessions, negotiating with skeptical board members, reassuring employees shaken by the revelations. Every move required precision and patience. The Tokyo team pushed hard for changes that rattled some executives who still clung to the old ways. Their grip was slipping, and desperation made them dangerous. Meanwhile, whispers of retaliation crept through the hallways. Anonymous emails hinted at legal battles and personal vendettas. I became hyper-aware of every interaction, every decision watched through a microscope. I wondered who I could trust, who was still loyal, and who was waiting for a misstep to strike. It was exhausting, a constant balancing act between vigilance and calm. One afternoon, Mayu and I reviewed the latest audit results. The numbers told a story of slow but steady improvement. Departments once riddled with fraud now showed cleaner records. New compliance measures were taking hold. It was proof that change was possible. Still, I knew statistics alone couldn't fix the culture. That took leadership and example. I focused on building that example. I held open forums with employees, inviting honest questions and feedback. I shared my own story, not as a victim but as someone who fought through betrayal to find strength. The response was humbling. People began opening up about their fears and hopes. The office, once a place of silent tension, started to breathe with cautious optimism. But then, the unexpected happened. A high-ranking executive, once a vocal opponent, approached me privately. His demeanor was guarded but sincere. He admitted his mistakes, expressed remorse, and offered his full support for the reforms. It was a moment of profound significance, proof that even the hardest hearts could change. I accepted his alliance, wary but hopeful. Still, not everyone was ready to surrender. Late one evening, as I worked through a mountain of reports, I found my office door slightly ajar. Inside, confidential documents had been tampered with, pages missing, files corrupted. It was a stark reminder that the fight was far from over. I reported the sabotage to security and doubled down on data protections. Every step forward came with a risk of being pulled back. Throughout it all, Mayu remained my anchor. Her calm pragmatism balanced my intensity. We planned meticulously for the Tokyo team's next visit, preparing to present progress and address remaining vulnerabilities. Their approval was crucial not only for company stability, but for restoring faith among global partners. During a tense review meeting, the CEO surprised us by publicly acknowledging my leadership and the company's renewed direction. His endorsement sent shockwaves through the ranks. The message was clear: the old ways were ending and a new era was beginning. It was a victory, but one I knew required relentless effort to maintain. One of the hardest moments came when I had to make a painful decision, letting go of a longtime colleague implicated in wrongdoing. The personal cost was heavy, but necessary to uphold the company's integrity. It underscored the reality that rebuilding trust sometimes meant breaking ties, even with those you once counted on. As months passed, the company slowly regained its footing. Investor confidence rose, employee morale improved, and the toxic culture began to dissipate. The scars of betrayal remained, but they were transforming into lessons, reminders of why vigilance mattered. Yet, beneath the progress, I sensed a lingering shadow. The networks of corruption were fractured but not erased. Powerful interests still sought influence behind the scenes. The fight to protect the company's soul was ongoing, a quiet war waged in boardrooms and back channels. One evening, as I prepared for a key presentation, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message. It was from Mayu, simple but urgent. New threat. Need to act fast. My heart quickened. Just when I thought we had turned the corner, the battle had shifted again. I gathered my trusted allies, briefing them on the emerging danger. We mobilized swiftly, leveraging every resource to investigate and neutralize the threat. It was a reminder that leadership meant constant vigilance, that the price of success was eternal readiness. Despite the exhaustion, I felt a deep well of resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a company. I was fighting for justice, for the countless silent voices who deserved transparency and respect. Every betrayal, every setback had forged me into someone unbreakable. As the night deepened, I stared out the window, city lights flickering like stars. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and challenges, but also hope. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with truth, courage, and an unshakable belief in what could be rebuilt. The final stretch was the hardest yet, the reckoning no one could avoid. The new threat Mayu had warned me about wasn't just whispers or shadows anymore. It was a full-scale attempt to derail everything we'd fought for. A coordinated smear campaign hit the media, painting me as a reckless disruptor who had brought chaos to the company. Anonymous sources leaked doctored emails and twisted narratives that could have shattered my credibility overnight. The old guard's last desperate move to reclaim power, but I refused to be swallowed by lies. I gathered my team, each member battle-worn but resolute, and we crafted a counterattack rooted in undeniable truth. We released comprehensive evidence, including every document, timestamp, and testimony we'd painstakingly collected. Transparency became our weapon. I spoke directly to the company, investors, and the public. No spin, no excuses, just honest, raw facts. The response was overwhelming. Instead of doubt, we earned respect. Instead of silence, we sparked a movement for accountability. At the heart of it all was a moment I will never forget, the boardroom, where the final votes were, cast to remove the last obstructive executives and solidify the new leadership. I sat at the head of the table, no longer the quiet employee but the architect of a transformed company. The faces around me told a story of reluctant acceptance turning into genuine belief. When the CEO stood and publicly thanked me for my courage and resilience, the applause was more than noise. It was redemption, but this wasn't just about corporate victory. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my future. I thought back to that humiliating moment when I overheard Gregory mocking me in Japanese, unaware I understood every word. That sting of betrayal had lit a fire in me that burned away fear and doubt. Every secret email, every forged document uncovered, every late-night call with Mayu had been a step on this path. The company culture shifted visibly. Offices once cloaked in suspicion became hubs of collaboration. Policies that once tolerated silence now encouraged boldness. Former skeptics became champions of change. And me? I grew into a leader who understood that power was never about control, but about service, integrity, and trust. Months later, standing before a packed conference hall to announce our company's new global initiative on ethical business practices, I saw faces that had once doubted me now nodding with respect. The journey had been long and painful, but the victory was profound. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, rewriting the rules in a world that often tried to silence voices like mine. Yet, as the applause echoed, I knew this was only the beginning. Corruption and betrayal were battles that would always exist, but with each victory, the tide could turn. I was ready for whatever came next, armed with the lessons of the past and the unshakable belief that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would always find its way. The story of Avery, the underdog who turned betrayal into triumph, was now a beacon for those who dared to stand up, speak out, and reclaim their power.